The Song of Guilt, when a grandfather's secret broke Simon Cowell's heart. The guitar trembled in William Henderson's weathered hands as he sat on the stool center stage, his 68-year-old frame hunched under the weight of 5 years of unbearable guilt. Simon Cowell watched from the judge's table, initially expecting another sentimental grandparent performance. But when William opened his mouth and began to sing about his grandson Tommy, the words that poured out weren't just about love and loss. They were about the secret that had been eating him alive since that terrible afternoon when everything went wrong. What Simon was about to hear would shatter every assumption about grief, responsibility, and whether some sins can ever be forgiven. William Henderson had been the kind of grandfather every child deserved. For 7 years, little Tommy had been the light of his life, a precocious boy with bright blue eyes and an infectious laugh who spent every weekend at Grandpa William's house in suburban Ohio. William's daughter Sarah worked double shifts as a nurse, and he gladly became Tommy's primary caregiver during her long hours. Their routine was sacred. Saturday mornings, building model airplanes in the garage, afternoon fishing at Miller's Pond, evening guitar lessons where William taught Tommy simple chords on his old acoustic guitar. Tommy was a natural musician, his small fingers finding notes with surprising accuracy for a 7-year-old. "Grandpa, when I grow up, I want to play guitar like you," Tommy had said just weeks before it happened. "Will you teach me all your songs?" "All of them and more, buddy," William had promised, ruffling the boy's sandy hair. "We've got all the time in the world." But they didn't. July 15th, 2019, started like any other Saturday. Tommy had spent the night, and they'd planned a special day, a trip to the new water park that had opened across town. William had been looking forward to it for weeks, imagining Tommy's excitement at the giant slides and wave pools. The problem was the bottle of whiskey in William's kitchen cabinet. William had been sober for 3 years. After his wife Martha's death from cancer, he'd crawled into a bottle and nearly lost everything: his relationship with Sarah, his job, his self-respect. Getting sober had been the hardest thing he'd ever done, but it was also what allowed him to become the grandfather Tommy deserved. But July 15th was Martha's birthday. She would have been 65, and William, alone in his kitchen while Tommy watched cartoons in the living room, made the decision that would destroy everything. Just one drink, he told himself, just to toast Martha's memory, just to take the edge off the pain that still hit him like a freight train on special days. One drink became two. Two became half the bottle. By the time Tommy bounded into the kitchen, asking when they were leaving for the water park, William was drunk for the first time in 3 years. He should have called Sarah, should have postponed the trip, should have admitted his failure and asked for help. Instead, he told himself he was fine, told himself he could handle it, told himself that Tommy would be devastated if they didn't go. William drove to the water park with his 7-year-old grandson in the passenger seat, his blood alcohol level nearly twice the legal limit. The accident happened on Route 35, just 10 minutes from their destination. William never saw the red light he ran, never saw the pickup truck that slammed into the passenger side of his sedan, never had a chance to throw his body in front of Tommy's to protect him. Tommy died instantly. William walked away with a concussion and 3 broken ribs. The police report was straightforward. William Henderson, 63, driving under the influence, caused a fatal collision that resulted in the death of his grandson, Thomas Henderson, age 7. William was charged with vehicular manslaughter and driving under the influence. He served 18 months in prison and lost his driver's license permanently. But the legal consequences were nothing compared to what the guilt did to him. Sarah couldn't bear to look at her father after the funeral. The sight of him was a constant reminder of her son's preventable death. She moved across the country without leaving a forwarding address. William's few friends gradually stopped calling. His neighbors whispered when he walked to the grocery store. For 5 years, William lived in complete isolation, carrying the weight of what he'd done. He sold his house and moved to a tiny apartment. He stopped playing guitar, the instrument that reminded him too much of Tommy's eager little hands reaching for the frets. He stopped doing almost everything except existing and hating himself. The only thing that kept him from suicide was the song. It started as a letter he couldn't send, an apology to Tommy for the unforgivable thing Grandpa had done. Words poured out of him in the middle of sleepless nights, desperate attempts to explain the inexplicable, to apologize for the unforgivable. Eventually, the words found melody. William, who hadn't touched his guitar in years, found himself picking out chords to accompany his confession. The song became his ritual, his penance, his only way of talking to the grandson he'd killed. He never intended anyone else to hear it, but Tommy's birthday was coming, what would have been his 13th, and William found himself thinking about the America's Got Talent auditions being held in nearby Cleveland. Tommy had loved the show. They used to watch it together, Tommy clapping for every act, believing everyone was talented in their own way. Maybe, William thought in a moment of desperate inspiration, maybe if I sing Tommy's song on his favorite show, he'll somehow hear it. Maybe he'll know how sorry I am. The audition process was surreal for William. He hadn't spoken to this many people in years. When producers asked about his song's inspiration, he simply said, "It's for my grandson who passed away." He didn't mention the rest, not yet. Now, sitting under the blazing lights of the Dolby Theater, William felt the weight of 3,000 pairs of eyes on him. This was Tommy's favorite show. Tommy should have been here with him, 13 years old and cheering from the audience. "Hello, William," Simon said gently, sensing something profound in the elderly man's demeanor. "Tell us about yourself." William cleared his throat, his voice raspy from years of minimal use. "My name is William Henderson. I'm 68 years old, and I wrote a song for my grandson, Tommy." "That's beautiful," Sophia said warmly. "How old is Tommy?" The question hung in the air like a blade. William's hands tightened on his guitar. "Tommy would have been 13 next week," William said quietly. "He died 5 years ago." The judge's expressions immediately shifted to sympathy. They'd heard many tribute songs over the years, and while they were always touching, they followed a familiar pattern of love and loss. "I'm so sorry for your loss," Heidi said gently. "What was Tommy like?" William's eyes filled with tears, but he managed to speak. "He was everything good in the world, curious, kind, full of music. He wanted to play guitar like his grandpa." His voice broke slightly. "I was teaching him." "And this song is your way of honoring his memory?" Howie asked. William looked directly at the main camera, as if he could see through it to wherever Tommy might be watching. "This song is my way of telling him the truth I should have told everyone 5 years ago." Something in his tone made Simon lean forward. This wasn't going to be a typical memorial song. "What truth is that, William?" Simon asked quietly. William took a shaky breath. "The truth about why he's dead." The silence in the theater was immediate and total. This had just shifted from a tribute to something much darker and more complex. William positioned his fingers on the guitar frets and began to play. The melody was haunting, beautiful, and heartbreaking, the kind of song that seemed to carry years of pain in every note. When he began to sing, his voice was rough but honest, carrying the weight of confession. "Tommy, I've got something to tell you, something I should have said before. About that day we went driving, about why you're not here anymore. I told them all it was an accident, that fate had made its cruel choice. But Tommy, I need you to hear this. I need you to hear Grandpa's voice. I was drinking that morning, on Grandma's birthday, feeling sad. I thought just one would help me, but I made the choice that turned me bad. I drove us to the water park, with poison running through my veins, and when that truck came through the light, I couldn't stop, couldn't brake. Tommy, your grandpa killed you. With his weakness and his lies, I took your future, your dreams, your laughter. I'm the reason that you died." By this point, the entire theater was in stunned silence. This wasn't a memorial song. This was a confession. William was admitting to vehicular manslaughter on national television, revealing that his grandson's death wasn't a tragic accident, but the result of his own terrible choices. Simon felt tears streaming down his face. In 20 years of judging, he had never heard anything so raw, so brutally honest, so devastatingly real. But William wasn't finished. "Every night I see your face. Every morning I wake up and know that the person you were meant to become will never have a chance to grow. I can't ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve a second chance. But Tommy, I wanted you to hear this before I take my final dance. I love you more than music, more than breathing, more than life, and I'll carry this guilt forever like a blade, like a knife. So this song isn't for healing. This song isn't to make me feel better. This song is just the truth, Tommy. This song is my confession letter. As the final chords faded, William set down his guitar and looked directly at Simon through his tears. I killed my grandson, he said simply. I was drunk and I drove and I killed the most important person in my world. I've been living with that for 5 years and I wanted him to know the truth before He trailed off. Simon stood up immediately and walked onto the stage. He sat down next to William, not as a judge, but as one human being trying to comfort another. William, Simon said softly. Before what? William's voice was barely a whisper. Before I join him. I've been planning it for Tommy's birthday next week. I wanted to sing this song first so he'd know I never stopped loving him, even though I'm the monster who destroyed his life. The confession hit the theater like a physical blow. This man wasn't just sharing his guilt, he was saying goodbye. William, Simon said, his voice steady despite his emotions, look at me. William met his eyes with difficulty. What you did was unforgivable. You're right about that. You made a choice that cost Tommy his life, and that choice will haunt you forever. I'm not going to tell you it's okay, because it's not. William nodded, accepting the judgment he'd been carrying alone for years. But, Simon continued, Tommy is gone, and destroying yourself won't bring him back. It will just mean that your mistake killed 2 people instead of 1. Simon gestured to the audience, many of whom were crying openly. You just did something incredibly brave. You told the truth when it was easier to lie. You faced your guilt when it would have been simpler to hide. That doesn't erase what you did, but it shows that somewhere inside the man who made that terrible choice, there's still someone worth saving. William shook his head. I don't deserve to be saved. Maybe not, Simon agreed. But Tommy deserves better than a grandfather who gave up. He deserves a grandfather who spends whatever time he has left making sure no other child dies the way he did. Simon stood up and addressed the entire theater. Ladies and gentlemen, we just heard one of the most honest songs ever performed on this stage. William Henderson didn't come here for sympathy or applause. He came here to tell the truth about the worst mistake anyone could make. He looked back down at William. And now that you've told that truth, you have a choice. You can let it destroy you completely, or you can let it change you. You can spend your remaining years making sure other people don't make your mistake. The judges joined Simon on stage, their faces showing a mixture of heartbreak and hope. William, Sophia said through her tears, your song was heartbreaking because it was honest. And honesty, even painful honesty, is the beginning of healing. You can't undo what you did, Howie added, but you can honor Tommy's memory by making sure his death means something, by helping other people avoid your mistake. 4 yeses, Heidi said simply, not because what you did was right, but because what you're doing now, facing the truth, choosing honesty over comfort, that's what courage looks like. William looked around at the judges, at Simon, at the audience of people who had heard his darkest truth and somehow found compassion instead of condemnation. I don't understand, he whispered. William, Simon said, you came here planning to say goodbye. Instead, you're going to say hello to the rest of your life, a life spent honoring Tommy not by joining him, but by making sure no other family goes through what yours did. The standing ovation that followed wasn't for William's performance. It was for his honesty, his courage, and the possibility of redemption, even in the darkest circumstances. William never performed his song on television again. Instead, he became a speaker for Mothers Against Drunk Driving, traveling the country to tell his story. Not the sanitized version, but the brutal truth about how one moment of weakness destroyed everything he loved. He never forgave himself for Tommy's death, but he learned to live with his guilt in a way that honored his grandson's memory. And sometimes, on Tommy's birthday, he would play the song again, not as a goodbye, but as a promise that he would keep fighting to make sure no other child died because someone chose alcohol over responsibility, because some mistakes can never be undone. But sometimes, if we're brave enough to tell the truth about them, they can still teach the world something valuable, and sometimes that's enough.